All right. Hey, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Once again, we are back taking a look at the tropics. Today is Monday, September 2nd, 2019. And of course, we remain locked on Major Hurricane Dorian, a catastrophically powerful Category 5 hurricane that is parked over Grand Bahama Island this morning and is nearly stalled right now. And we are awaiting to see how the storm is going to begin to move off and accelerate to the north and how close this may come to Florida and the rest of the southeast coast going into the week here. So we do have a big, busy week ahead of us. If you just woke up, the first thing you're watching, the latest from last night, is that there's really not a lot of changes. This is the 8 a.m. from the National Hurricane Center based off the 5 a.m. advisory, and the Hurricane Center has mostly stayed pat on their track. They're looking at this 80th parallel as pretty much their kind of their line in the sand for how we're Dorian's going to come. But with forecast uncertainties remain, and the west and eastern envelopes are still kind of being fine tuned. We're still looking at a few things that are going to fine tune that forecast. But overall, this 3 day cone is still ominous for Florida because hurricane watches still exist all up and down the coastline, and the system still has a good potential to pass at or just west of this trend right here, which would put some serious hurricane like conditions on the Florida coastline. So this still remains a very dangerous storm, and although forecast confidence has increased again from last night that this likely does not landfall in Florida, I think that the scenarios where it actually comes ashore are pretty much been kind of set a bit further east of that as far as like the more western solutions. But there is still a forecast confidence this may come very close and put some pretty nasty conditions over Florida's coast. So I hope people didn't sleep on this thing completely and they didn't just get fatigued and turn it off and say, well, it must miss us, whatever. This is going to be a Hurricane Matthew like event for the Florida coastline. If Dorian happens to wander any closer than this center track line, it will be potentially worse in terms of wind speed. It's not as big of a storm as Matthew, but it is definitely going to be a nasty one when it comes by. You do not want a Category 4 to 3 hurricane coming that close to your state ever, I promise. So anyway, this is the latest from National Hurricane Center as far as the track is concerned. Let's look at the hurricane watches and warnings again. Hurricane warnings are in effect for obviously Grand Bahama and the Abacos, Jupiter Inlet to the Volusia Brevard County line in Florida, and hurricane watches are in effect from north of Deerfield Beach to Jupiter Inlet and the Volusia Brevard County line to the mouth of the St. Mary's River. So, again, hurricane conditions are expected within 36 hours or less in the south central Florida region around Melbourne and Vero Beach and areas north and south, and especially north of West Palm. And hurricane watches are possible, or hurricane conditions are possible within 48 hours, all the way up from Daytona Beach to the Florida-Georgia border, and then the county south, and to include West Palm Beach. So you can see that hurricane conditions are still possible to expected along the Florida coastline. This is what I'm trying to stress here, guys, that these little track adjustments make a big deal. So let's talk about those this morning. This is the current satellite presentation of Hurricane Dorian, and there are some encouraging things and some concerning things about it, but overall, the most concerning thing is that a Category 5 hurricane has winds and rain touching the Florida peninsula, which is pretty terrifying. But we do see that the storm has mostly stalled this morning. The storm came across last night, Great Abacos. It did a little stair step and it moved almost due west and moved into Grand Bahama, and then sort of has this stalling motion where it kind of looped back and it sort of stopped. It's moving generally west at 1 mile per hour. So these people in the eye wall of either side of the storm are getting Andrew, but they've been getting Andrew on repeat for more than 12 hours in some cases. So the hell that is being experienced right now on this island is probably not being reported very much because I think power has gone completely out to the islands. The damage is going to be catastrophic again, like catastrophic in every sense of the word, guys. So just be prepared for what you're going to see in the coming days as people start getting some more word out. It's not going to be pretty. Those images you saw yesterday were a snippet of what you're going to see. I don't know if this is really fully understood or grasped by the media of what we're watching unfold. This is historic in every sense of the word. But we do see that Dorian has stalled over the Grand Bahama Island, and this stall is important because where this occurs and how much further west Dorian gets is a big deal. Looking at the latest guidance for intensity, we see that the storm will be coming down from Category 5. It still is a Category 5 with 165-mile-an-hour sustained winds, but I suspect that will be starting to come down. We see some evidence of probably upwelling is probably starting to occur. That's where the storm starts picking up cooler water temperatures under it as it pulls up all the warm water. Cool water comes up from the bottom to replace the warm water, and then it sucks that up instead, which will weaken it. We also have evidence on the Miami radar that a eye wall replacement cycle may be coming in. We do have this second kind of band of an eye wall sort of trying to work its way in towards the center. And when it does, the bigger eye will take over. This eye will drop out, and then we'll have a weaker Dorian in terms of overall wind speed. But the hurricane force winds will extend further out and cover more ground. So while it's good news that the intensity of the hurricane comes down, you get a bigger hurricane overall, and it puts those hurricane force winds closer to impacting the Florida coastline. So kind of a good bad take there. Looking at the current track forecast, we're talking about a lot of little things today. We're watching this trough in the upper levels come across and break down the high pressure to Dorian's north. This high will break down and continue to be eroded, and that will open up a weakness north of Dorian that Dorian will want to feel and want to move towards. The question is exactly when and how that happens, and how fast the high pressure to his west to his east rebuilds to push it back towards the coastline. This is a fine micromanage. You can kind of use the Grand Bahama Island as sort of your benchmark here. If you see the island up under the satellite presentation, what I can do real quick is just I can just turn off the data for a second. So just know the eye of Dorian is right about here this morning. If the storm were to lift off right about here or close to it, this kind of sets your envelope for the more easterly tracks. And this is the best news scenario. This puts Dorian almost 80 to 100 miles offshore, which is very limited impacts along the coast. Low to mid-grade tropical storm at best. Inland counties get almost nothing. But the more likely scenario is Dorian does find some time today to wander even a little bit west, and if the edge of the island is kind of your benchmark, you're kind of looking for that edge of the island where the most likely track is to occur. And this is about that 50 to 60-mile pass offshore, which looks better. It's not going to be a direct impact, but it's not going to be a sunny day either. And then you get into the danger, Will Robinson, if you see Dorian coming pretty far west of this island and then turning north. This kind of sets your western envelope, and you get this 20, 30-mile rake. And this is where we still say the hurricane conditions could occur for the Florida coastline. That's why we're still telling you. And when we talk about the forecast in a second, we'll be seeing why the potential for hurricane force wind speeds sustained is not off the table. So we'll have to watch this micromanage really close. And this also has implications for the Georgias and Carolinas down the road as far as what they see. So that's sort of the benchmark you're looking for this morning if you're watching this on TV or otherwise. Again, trying to talk about this ridge and high pressure here. Ridge here as it breaks away, you're going to watch this high pressure rebuild at Dorian's east, and the timing of this just depends. So you see the trough really breaks down here, and you can almost see the break right here going into early tomorrow morning. You see the trough's lifted out, but you see there's actually see this kind of like roadmap right here. That's kind of like Dorian's weakness it's following. Notice how there's no flow in the 500 millibar chart here. Dorian wants to find this weakness and it wants to move towards it, but already you see this high pressure beginning to move back into the picture the next couple frames. So by Tuesday, as the storm begins to gain latitude, notice how the high pressure has slipped south and it's begun to rebuild quickly as it will do over the Atlantic. And this rebuild and rebound is very important. And our next track going into late Wednesday will be to see how this trough responds and if it's able to dig down and pull Dorian away, or if it's not and Dorian either hugs the coast or could even possibly come on shore somewhere from Georgia northward. So, guys, y'all are next up, and we'll be tracking all that as well. But until we see Dorian leave and we see the trajectory and how close it gets to Florida, and we're just kind of up and down as far as that's concerned. The latest forecast models do hold it offshore as far as the hurricane models go, but I would say these have been a hair east for comfort. And if I was, could make these things move, I would move them a tad further west right now. I think everything we've kind of seen suggests on or west of the hurricane center track, which if I kick that back and go to 5 days, whew, that's close. That is a hurricane. It would be a category 3 approaching Georgia and South Carolina. It'd be weakening to a 2, but that's a pretty strong hurricane coming very, very close. If you remember Hurricane Matthew, it would be coming closer than Hurricane Matthew did, because I'm pretty sure Hurricane Matthew got to about South Carolina and turned away and was mostly a rainfall event. But this would be significantly more impacts than Matthew. It would be moving fast, so that's good. But we'll get to you guys later on this week. The clarity just isn't quite there yet. Looking at the actual forecast, this is for South Central Florida. This is the Melbourne Forecast Office. Martin, St. Lucie, Indian River, Brevard, and Volusia counties. Generally, your expected conditions are going to be winds in the 40, 50 mile an hour range sustained. and then you're going to see those gusts to the end of tropical storm force in that upper echelon, but likely mostly staying below hurricane force except a few isolated spots. The question the mark remains, though, there's three tracks I showed you. If you get to that reasonable worst case, if you get to that westward side of the track, like some models indicate, then you're talking about sustained hurricane force winds with those gusts probably reaching 100 or 110 miles an hour. So the fact that that's still on the table is there for a reason. It's not just because they want to be overcautious. This case is not off the table, guys. So we have to watch that micromanage and small adjustment today. This is the Jacksonville forecast office. Again, as the storm would turn, Jacksonville has this little barrier, where you draw the line at the edge of the coast, they get this little 30, 40-mile barrier. So they have a little bit better conditions up here. But again, you see this hurricane force wind gust could happen as far south of Daytona Beach on this forecast. And we're talking about 50s and 60s for the Jacksonville coastline, which isn't far off from what we got with Hurricane Matthew or Hurricane Irma, when those wind gusts were in the upper 70s to low 80s in a few locations. And if you take just a 20-mile wobble and you find yourself not that close, but on like a westerly crack where the storm's only 20, 30 miles offshore, you can add 20 miles per hour to this graphic. So instead of 55, that's 75. Instead of 64, that's 84. And 70 to 72, that's 92. So keep in mind that those higher end echelon forecasts still exist for a reason. Please do not sleep on this storm, guys. Anyone in Florida needs to still be ready for a hurricane until further notice. I believe we have our goalpost kind of set, like I drew a minute ago, but generally speaking, that's what we're talking about. Looking at the precipitation forecast, anywhere from about 6 to 8 inches. Some people will get over a foot of rain. Tropical storms just kind of are spotty, but you can expect some significant rainfall. Now this thing's going to track a little bit closer, but the rainfall after the coastal counties will be significantly less as you go further inland. It'll be much more spotty. The only other thing I would say here is also watch for tornadoes, especially from most of the state can be watching for tornadoes. These smaller, short-lived tornadoes that come out of these storms when the atmosphere is rotating as the bands come on shore. I would say the inland counties, besides the rainfall threat, they have to worry about the isolated tornado threat as well. And you can also see them at the coast and the squall lines that come ashore there. So that's kind of what I got for you guys this morning. I think that pretty much covers everything. So again, Hurricane Dorian expected to make this turn today to the north. We will see exactly where and how it does on the island and where exactly it begins to lift north. As long as we see it take off somewhere to the east of the edge of the island, that's good news. If it starts wandering further west than that, then we're looking at the potential worst case scenario as far as wind forecasts are concerned. It will come down in intensity, but it's going to be a very slow rundown. We have a lot of micromanages to watch, and the weather forecasts are looking still about like this in the high tropical storm with some potential hurricane gusts, but a slight wobble to the west, guys, and we're talking about a hurricane. So that's what I got for you this morning. As always, thanks for watching and have a good one.